Okay, it is 7:02 and we'll go ahead and start. So welcome everybody to the March 7th Lafayette Planning Commission meeting. Commissioners, welcome. Public, welcome. Lafayette community. It's 7:02. We can officially count that as our starting time. So we can start with roll call. Commissioner Farson.
Present.
Commissioner Maggio.
Present.
Commissioner Mason.
Present.
Commissioner Sturm.
Present.
Vice Chair Labange.
Present.
And Chair Radnich present. Commissioner Heising is out tonight. So there's 6 commissioners present. The agenda, adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So
Or ask
moved.
any, okay, perfect.
Second.
Thank you. So moved by Commissioner Farzan, second by Vice Chair Labange. Then continue, I guess, sorry, public comments, and this is for items not on, oh, wait, hold on. We need to do a roll call for adopting the agenda. I always forget that one. Okay, we'll take a vote, roll call vote. Commissioner Farsan,
Aye.
Commissioner Maggio,
Aye.
Commissioner Mason,
Aye.
Commissioner Sturm,
Aye.
Vice Chair Labange,
Aye.
Chair Radnich, aye. And again, Commissioner Heising is not here tonight, so 6 in favor. So now public comment. This is for items not on tonight's agenda or not on an upcoming agenda. So I'll look to staff to see if there's anyone wanting to speak.
So if you would like to speak on an item that's not on tonight's agenda or an upcoming agenda, but is within the purview of the Planning Commission, please go ahead and raise your hand now. So Christian Mars has had their hand raised for a few minutes now. Sometimes it's an erroneous raising of what's in the hand. And so if that is erroneous, please go ahead and take it down. But if you do have a public comment for an item not on tonight's agenda or an upcoming, thank you. Appreciate that. Been running into that frequently. So none for public comment.
Okay, thank you. So we can move to item 5, the consent calendar. We do have one item on the consent calendar that's recommendations continue it to March 21st. Is there a motion to adopt the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Maggio, seconded by Vice Chair Labange. Thank you. And then item 6, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Roll call vote, please.
God dang it. I need to start writing the note. Thank you. Okay, we'll vote. Commissioner Farsan.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Maggio.
Aye.
Commissioner Mason.
Aye.
Commissioner Sturm.
Aye.
Vice Chair Labange.
Aye.
And Commissioner Radnich. Aye.
And then Chair, with respect to the agenda, multiple items are recommended for consideration, not tonight, no discussion tonight, but in the future. So 6A, the housing element, will be discussed this evening. 7A, the draft environmental impact report, will be discussed this evening. We'll take public comment on that. But the remaining items under 7, those include zoning text amendments related to the downtown specific plan. So ZT 0222, which is 7B, 7C, 7D, and E. I'm sorry, they're being renumbered. So those are recommended for continuance to a future date. And we would recommend 1 month out at this point in time so as not to have to renotice those. So April 4th would be our recommended continuance date when those items come up. And then the project, the variance application for Delaplane will be discussed this evening, time providing. And then the project on Los Erebus for Delamar, they have requested a continuance as of today. So they would like to not be discussed this evening, but be continued to the next meeting, March 21st. So when those items come up on the agenda, we'll go ahead and take a motion and vote on it. But so we're not removing them from tonight's agenda for tracking purposes. They'll remain, but the practice is to entertain a motion to continue them without discussion this evening.
Okay, thank you. With that, we can move to item 6A, continued public hearing. So it's for the housing element, section 2, goals, policies, and programs. This was the one we did see this in our last meeting. We gave some suggested edits, and it looks like Sarah has a presentation. Thanks, Sarah.
Very short. Thanks for the introduction. Yes, we are discussing goals, policies, and programs for the second time. Just a brief reminder that we are organizing the housing element to 3 sections, section 1, 2, and 3. We're at section 2, which is goals, policies, and programs. GPAC is currently working on section 3, and I'll be before you shortly. Goals, policies, and programs, sort of big picture to small picture. Goals are general direction setters. Policies are more specific statements that guide decision-making, and programs are implementation measures. Just a reminder, there are 10 goals that GPAC came up with. You'll notice goals 4 and 5 are placeholders. We are working on additional outreach to meet the affirmatively furthering fair housing requirements of the state law, which is a new requirement. There are some workshops for that later this month, so we'll come back before you for that. With regard to policies, not all of them require programs. Some of them can just be sort of policy statements. Programs are, like I said, focused on implementing goals and policies. And then changes from the 222 meeting, we added a lot of context, clarity, some internal consistency, and there is a chart in your staff report outlining your comments and then the responses to comments. The major changes is also outlined in the staff report. There's a redline version of the document, but the major changes we included a sustainable building tour for one of the green building incentives. We clarified the 15% affordability for the fee deferral for the conditions of approval program. We added for the Inlieu fee for the inclusionary housing Inlieu fee study that it would also evaluate impacts on smaller developments. We included, or for the diversity of housing types, we actually removed program 6.1E and made it a policy to encourage those missing middle units. We found that it wasn't quite as actionable as we had thought it was, and also to make sure it wasn't inconsistent with program 6.1C. And then program 8.2A, building height, we also included interviews with community members to incorporate the neighborhood context within that program. So this evening, we're asking that the Planning Commission review the updated goals, policies, and programs, provide any additional comments to staff, and forward a recommendation to the City Council to approve the draft. We're available for any questions if you have any.
Great, thank you. Are there any commissioner questions specific for Sarah or staff? We can save discussion of, particular line items or any, particular revisions. We can save that for after public comment, but are there any clarifying questions? Okay, seeing head shaking no. Then Sarah, we can open it for public comment.
If anyone on the Zoom meeting, the webinar, would like to make a comment on the goals, policies, and programs current item on the agenda, please go ahead, raise your hand now. and we will bring you in. When you're brought in, there'll be a momentary, it'll seem like a glitch. You're in no man's land between being an attendee and a panelist, but then you'll be able to unmute and turn on your camera if you'd like and make your comments. Robert Lavoie, you are being brought in as an attendee to voice your comments, and you have up to 3 minutes. And I don't see our Blue Sky timer today, so I will be using my iPhone timer today. Mr. Lavoie, you are in the meeting and are invited to unmute and offer your comments.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
All right.
Yeah, welcome.
Sorry, my camera's not working. It's been recording all day, I guess. I'm not sure who's watching.
It's okay. That's okay. Welcome.
Thank you. I have more than 3 minutes worth of comments, so I'll try and skim through here real fast. The item goal 3, policy 3.1, environmental responsibility. I've talked to the environmental committee several times about electrification, and I want to continue to voice my opposition to the city making choices for residents regarding their housing energy options. I don't think the city's competent to assess the scientific facts. There's actual evidence that higher temperatures and CO2 are actually beneficial for plants and crop yields. And it's just a difficult scientific topic, and there's a lot of disagreement, even though some of the politicians seem to think it's all settled. The bottom line is as elected officials, you shouldn't be limiting the choices for citizens for 50 years on their energy options. Then on item 6.1b, funding sources to support affordable housing development. I oppose the last sentence in this objective. It says the city will create a plan to utilize existing funds for the Housing Trust Fund and identify additional sources of ongoing revenue, such as commercial development linking fees and real estate transfer taxes. I'm just concerned about the last part of that sentence. You know, the point is that it's not our obligation to provide house welfare for other people. It's a political, more socialist objective. If the state of California wants to mandate that we provide affordable housing, they should fund it. They took away our redevelopment funds several years ago to subsidize their deficit, and now they've got a $31 billion surplus, and they're not providing any money for affordable housing. I think I heard 500 million or something, which would maybe cover Lafayette's needs. Let's see, I want to skip through here quick. Item 6.1d, the parking requirements. It makes sense, I think, for seniors to have a lower parking requirement because many of them can't drive when you get to a certain age. But just because people are living closer to BART doesn't mean that there's a less demand for parking. People are coming to Lafayette for the good schools and with bigger families. And so I think not providing adequate parking, especially within a half-mile radius of BART, is going to impact the businesses and the neighbors. So a developer may get away with providing inadequate parking, but the people that live in the neighborhood are the ones that get stuck with the problem for the next 50 years. And building height, finally, it says that we need to talk to developers. I don't think we need to talk to developers with 52 unit density at the 35 units with bonus, like 950 Huff Street. You got 50-foot heights and as little as 5-foot setbacks. We don't need to discuss that with developers. It's bad, and we need to fight it. So hope you guys can come up with some solutions for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lavoie. Any questions for the speaker? Okay, thank you for your comment.
Thanks so much.
We are seeing no other hands raised at this time and no callers. So *9 if you are calling in, but there are no callers.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we'll go ahead and close the public comment on item 6A and bring it back to the commission for discussion. Any thoughts? I did appreciate the red line version, and I also really appreciated staff including the matrix after that. Because when I first saw item 6.1E, I was kind of like, oh, I don't remember a big red line. So that was really helpful. Thank you. Is there anything any commissioners would like to start with or, comment on? Vice Chair Labange?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry about that. On 2.1B, new mixed use development. I just from the middle of it on, the city will conduct a study of potential impacts. And my question was a little step back, like I'm assuming the study, I'm trying to think how this goes from study to implementation. So my question would be, the city comes up with a study and comes up with a plan, and then that would come back to planning commission and city council or somebody, okay, to kind of say, yeah, that's good, or massage that, right? So there'll be a second kind of review of whatever plan comes back.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Now, and then I'm just jumping. Do you want me to jump around, or do you want me to? I didn't have a lot, but I had a couple of them.
No, that's fine. Go ahead. Because I think it was helpful last time going goal by goal, but I
Okay.
think this time it just makes sense. Maybe if you could just go in number order, but
Yeah.
just go for it.
And I actually jumped over 1.21 and 1.2A. Sorry.
Okay.
So how about we go back to 1 and I'll ask my question there. Sorry about that. On 1.2A, on the Nexus study, and I think in some of the additional information we saw, especially on the downtown versus distributed model, there was a different number of additional students that were going to be produced, or between 970 to 1,000 and change. I just wanted to make sure that the Nexus study will include development fees that go to the schools, right? And it's not that, I think the answer is that the developers don't pay for every additional student, but they pay a fee based on the Nexus study. And then the rest comes from the state. So the state in theory should pick up some additional costs for the additional students, because is that correct? What I'm really trying to get to the bottom of is, will these additional students be funded? Will the infrastructure be funded for what's going to be created by the additional housing? Anyone know?
That is the theory behind it. Can't attest to the actuality of it, but the state law empowers school districts to do a Nexus study and a fee study and establish the rate which would essentially cover the incremental capital costs associated with adding student load. But it does not, the developer, the builder is not responsible for the educational aspect of it, simply the facility aspect of it. And so the ongoing funding of students, not unlike today, the current student load, primarily comes from the state. And what we have heard is that it actually costs more to educate a student than what the state provides. And so there are gap filling mechanisms that communities use. But new students that would come into and occupy new units would be just like existing students.
So can I add a follow on? Because I thought that was the answer. Can the Nexus, knowing that it's going to be underfunded, or assuming that continues underfunded from the state, and even to, as the previous speaker said, people come to Lafayette because of the schools, can the Nexus put a bigger number on that, knowing that there's going to be a bigger shortfall.
Ms. Diana Elrod is here and can speak to that more, and then it might be a further question for the city attorney, but.
Okay.
Go ahead.
The only thing I would say is that the issue about schools is not something that is under the city's purview and so when we talk about the nexus studies, we're talking about city levied fees. So if it's levied by the school district would have to do its own nexus study. That's come up a number of times, whether, what is the impact on the schools? Well, the schools has to do that analysis. The city doesn't do it. So this is pertaining to things like if we wanted to implement Inlieu fees for inclusionary zoning, we'd have to do that study. It actually isn't a full nexus study, but it would be like a nexus study. Just that's the only thing I wanted to clarify.
Yeah, thank you for that. So because the schools are not sort of under the auspices of the city, the school district is empowered to do their own nexus studies and fee studies. But for the services that we provide, parkland, park facilities, walkways, et cetera, the city is empowered to do that.
Well, can I just tag on that then? The nexus study that the schools could choose to do, it's still tied to development, right? And, maybe a per square foot increase. So there's a, certain, so how does that get put into, the fact that we're trying to set the next line of, development fees? If the city controls their part, does everyone else put in their inputs so that it all gets captured?
They are two separate studies, and the city has previously done nexus studies that are on the books, and we charge those fees accordingly for the services that the city provides and the infrastructure that we provide. Separate from that, the school district does its own and updates it periodically. And the fees that a developer would pay are not collected by the city. They're actually collected by the building department on behalf of the school district. So that's the mechanism by which those fees are collected and then transferred at the county level.
Okay, so maybe for me to get my arms around why we're missing this is the schools will do that when the schools do that, and then it will get picked up. And this isn't really calling for that. And so I appreciate it. You guys are answering questions beyond what's really here. And I appreciate that. So I think I've got that, and I'll refocus to the city part. So I'm good. Thank you on that one.
Okay. Commissioner Farson, I saw your hand up. Is it something you want to chime in on this portion?
It got answered. I was going to chime in on the nexus for the schools. We're good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So Vice Chair Lavange, did you have others that you wanted to walk through?
I had two. I did the 2.1B.
Mm-hmm.
I had something on 3.1C on the green building initiative. If you want me to, I could.
Yes, please.
I think I brought this up before when we talked about this last time. I don't want to downplay certifications and awards for great LEED related development. If we want this to happen, if we want more green, building things done, I think we should incentivize them to get what we want, and the things that developers would want. And I know I'm not trying to kowtow to developers, but I don't think certificates are really, I think at one time that was a neat thing, and there are plaques on buildings, but I feel like, so things that would be desirable and then maybe would get these if we want them, if we want to drive more green building incentives, would be some, what's another word for nexus, but some connection to, density increases or waiver concession or something. Those are all hot button items, but something. So I thought, I was hoping we would have something to, so that we could see more of these done, because there would be something that the developer would say, well, that's worth it if it's not worth it on what they're currently doing. Because in my retail side of my world, what learned when trying to do this 10 years ago, and trying to incentivize tenants when I was a developer side, was the future savings on electricity and energy just wasn't a big enough draw to offset the cost that it would cost to do something green. So it just didn't go anywhere. So I feel like these aren't incentives enough to get people to do things. So I'm asking if there's any way to include incentives that will create more green building designs and developments.
Thank you. And so I will eventually ask staff if any other cities have something similar that maybe we could pull from, but I do see Commissioner Maggio's hand up, and I assume it's on this item. So would you like to chime in before we move? Okay, please do. If you could just unmute.
Thank you. Yes, so I'm following up on Commissioner Labange's comments, and I made comments at our last meeting, 3.1.c, green building. And I do think there's a lot more we can do to promote and encourage sustainable development. We have done a series of tours throughout the city on green buildings. I think Councilman Kwok has opened up his house. I had tours and fundraisers at my house 10 years ago with the Lafayette Eco House. There haven't been a lot of other greenhouses to tour. There's one other one off of Glenside, but very, very few green developments. And the reason being, it usually takes a little longer and costs a little more. So that's where we really need to work on making it viable for people. And I see in some of the programs, educating the public, great. I think we can do that as part of our programs, and linking the public with solar and other green energy tools, I think would also help. But there's got to be a way that we can help speed up the process and help make it easier to build green than build the non-green, or just what we're doing within code right now. And then just one other comment on 3.1.b with electricity. I know our speaker mentioned that he really is in favor of the public having choices on energy. And although I know that we're not really driving the bus on this as a county and state initiative to move everyone to electrification, but my concern here is that I don't feel that electricity is still not all that green unless you're deep green and really supporting 100% renewable electricity. And most people aren't doing that yet. And then the other thing, my concern here is it's just still not all that reliable. We have so many power outages. I would hate everyone to be stuck with just one form of power without a choice and resorting to generators. So that's it for me.
Okay, thank you. Before we go more into 3.1b, back to 3.1c for staff, hearing the comments that the commissioners are bringing up, does that give you maybe a starting point of something to give you a little more direction on what the Planning Commission is wanting to see for item 3.1c, or is anyone in Moraga or Orinda like a similar community to Lafayette? Do they have a similar program that we can look at for other incentives?
Yep, I think that we have good direction. It sounds like the speed and the cost are the barriers to doing those types of projects, and that you're providing direction to look at other cities to see if they do have a good program in place, which we might be able to borrow, steal. So we can do that, and we're happy to bring it back or place it on consent or bring it back. We still have a little bit of time for this.
Okay. Thank you. And, oh, go ahead.
On that note, we've heard comments related to sort of speed, time is money when you are trying to build something. So that could include fast tracking green projects. And money is always an incentive, particularly when the outlay costs up front. And Commissioner Labange, Vice Chair Labange spoke to that. So would it please the commission if we added those as things to look at and consider as incentives? Not promising that both of those would be, but to kind of charge ETF, the Environmental Task Force, or another entity to look at the spectrum of incentives, recognition, fast tracking, economics. And so there's always going to be a trade-off with the money aspect of it. There would need to be some diminution in fees of one sort or another. So, but I think that would run the full spectrum and empower the when it's looked at to be able to identify those that are acceptable and so I'll ask if adding looking at considering fast tracking and fee deferrals or waivers would be something that the Planning Commission would support adding.
I do see Commissioner Maggio shaking her head in approval with the thumbs up. Vice Chair Labange, I'm interested in your opinion, and then Commissioner Farsan, I see you'd like to chime in also, and Commissioner Sturm. So let's go, Vice Chair Labange, since you were part of this initial item to bring up, and then we'll go Commissioner Farsan and Sturm.
I'll admit I'm not an expert. I'm not even close to an expert on this, but I do feel incentives drive people to do what you incentivize them to. But I want to be careful about the money part. I certainly would like to see incentives that have been used and have been deemed to be worthwhile incentive to get what you want versus, and I think that's what you meant. So in that sense, yes, I would. I think it's very hard because, again, if any incentive is created, then people, this will come out wrong, will take advantage of incentives. It's a gift to a certain degree. So if they're not tied to what you want, you careful what you get. So, but so this might be one that versus creating new ground. If we can find someone who's done an effective one, that's been tested, I'd be all for that.
Okay. Commissioner Farsan.
Thank you. So I'm in favor of the way Greg laid it out. And basically, look at the spectrum of things we could use as incentives. But I will say, I'm not hugely in favor of the city handing out money to get people to build green. To me, that's, again, spectrum, I'm open to it. If they look at it and decide this is the best way to do it, obviously we'll look at it again. But I'm still not a huge proponent, considering how little money we generally have, to throw that in at someone to build green. Just putting that out there. But I agree with the spectrum of choices for incentives. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Commissioner Sturm and then Mason.
I just wanted to add that while I think incentives are helpful and can really push things in the right direction, it seems to me that the biggest hurdle for most homeowners, or probably more like single family homeowners, is just the how-to. I mean, most of the standards are prescriptive, but I think one thing that would be really helpful, and I don't know what the solution to this would be, because clearly planning staff has a full work plan, but having some kind of a resource documentation that's available to people, I think would be really, really helpful. Like in our house, we got solar and we're on batteries, but I mean, everything, people are working full-time jobs, and then all these little details that come into play when you're building your own house take so much time to research all the options and rebates and everything, get bids, compare. So, I mean, one idea would be if we can pull from other resource documents, there's, I think I have it around the different little booklets sometimes that have various contractors and subcontractors. Sometimes you can get things like that for materials. If there's something like that we can pull and just put together quickly, so there's some kind of package that we can hand people when they make their first sort of exploratory visit to the planning counter. Or we could potentially wrap it into the project where we're going to put together like ADU sets that are pre-approved, and that could maybe in that set we can start to identify like materials and products and things that would fit the bill, and we could direct people to those sets even if they're building their primary dwelling unit. They can look at that for some go-to choices.
Yeah, and thank you for recognizing we do have a full work plan, and I don't think it would be beneficial for the city or the residents to try to have us be somewhat expert in this topic area. So there I believe entities out there that provide this service as a function of kind of not-for-profits or government coalitions. There are a couple that I'm thinking of. I mean, it could even be the Air Quality Management District that may have this in-house technical assistance that could be available to our residents if we just know about it, sign up for it, participate in the program. BayRen is another. So I think providing technical assistance to residents is another mechanism to assist them and incentivize.
Well, on top of that, technology is changing very fast, right? And I would believe that anyone that is building a super green house is pretty proud of it and open to having conversations. Not that people have already built their house, it's not their responsibility to guide someone through, but I would bet through these tours and different mechanisms like that, technology and information can be shared. Commissioner Mason?
Yes, thank you. I had concerns about the incentives because reality, since we don't have money, it's essentially a zero-sum game. So incentives is one come out of cost to another, and so much of green is essentially site dependent, how close you are to mass transit, your solar exposure. Some houses it just doesn't work. Ours is one of them. So I want to be careful about there. I think that the ability for people to access more resources is the best thing we can do. The other thing on fast track, and staff could probably weigh in on this more, is to what extent do we have control of that? Because since we outsource the plan review process to the county, I'm assuming that is a portion we don't have any control over. And, hey, we process the homes that come before us as, fast as we can. And no one's going to like shortchanging the process here because a house is green but still sticks out and is too tall, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think we need to be careful with what we approve. But I know that, we, for example, I know a lot of other people would pay more for a greenhouse, and the basic demographics of the city is most people would.
Thank you. So for staff, is that super clear? Thursday?
I think it is.
Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say at the end, I would like clarity on whether or not you want to see it again, or if you are forwarding with those comments.
Yeah, okay. Just write a note here. Okay. Oh, Commissioner Sturm, is it on this item?
Yes, I just have one other question. Last meeting, I had asked about potentially moving up the timeline for the phase 2 objective standards. And I saw that there was an update on where the objective standards are at, but I think that the 2026 date was the same from the previous matrix. And I just wanted to ask.
Oh, wait,
staff-
sorry, Commissioner. Is there anything else on 3.1C? Because I want to just keep the
Oh,
thought
sorry.
process
No,
going.
okay.
Okay, sorry. So thank you, and I will come back to you. Commissioner Labange, originally you were going through your items in order, and I believe 3.1C sounded like it might be your last, or did you have any others?
I think that's good.
Okay, and then Commissioner Maggio, you chimed in on 3.1C and also brought up 3.1B. So can we go back now to 3.1B, and then we'll work through yours, and then Commissioner Sturm will move to yours. So Commissioner Maggio.
Yeah, I said everything I was going to say about the electrification, and I welcome other commissioners' comments.
Okay, Commissioner Farsan.
The only thing I was going to say about that category, and I know we had a member of the community weigh in on that. I think this is saying we're going to look at options, right? The way it's written, it doesn't mean we're moving to electrification and/or gas. So I think that's the way I'm looking at this, at the language here. We're going to look at it and see if it's an option. And again, based on the timing of this, looking at it again. Sorry, I'm looking. So 2024, let's just say there's going to be a lot that's going to happen in the world in terms of renewable energy and where we're going with electrification over the next 2 years. I think there'll be a lot of runway to decide on where we're leaning. So that was my only commentary there.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Mason on 3.1B.
Yeah, thank you. On the whole electrification, I get it. We're going to look at it in the sometime in the future. One of the things I haven't seen anything about, and I tried to look up, is where propane fits in the whole discussion. It's some places considered green, some places say it's greener, and I couldn't get a good read on it, because that might fall somewhere in between. But the big fear is those above ground propane tanks are real fire hazards. That's, one of the big problems in Paradise. So I just wanted to at least kind of find out where propane fits on the whole schedule, or at least if that's an option to discuss, because I don't see any reference on it anywhere.
Go ahead.
As far as I know, it's only for new construction and connection, like hard lining, and I don't think that propane is currently regulated with these regulations or anticipated to be. Greg, you have a different understanding? Okay.
No, I don't have an answer regarding propane this evening.
I will add, when this item first came, when we first saw this on GPAC, I wasn't super comfortable with 3.1B, because my mind was going to just all the power shutdowns that we've been having over the last couple of years and wildfire. But just to give a little background, in this item, GPAC did specifically add in the wording basically surrounding Contra Costa County communities that consider efforts within other Contra Costa communities to kind of see what other cities are doing, not just cities, in other portions of the state, actually within our county. And then we did add in the part of in lieu of natural gas or oil. So I do understand it's coming, and I don't know, I just wanted to provide that little bit of background for some of the additions that GPAC did make earlier. So I guess as a whole for this item, I know we have some direction we've provided on 3.1C. Is there anything specific that the Planning Commission would like to see written differently about 3.1B or propose to be different? Okay. Commissioner Maggio, did you have others that you wanted to talk through?
No, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Sturm, I know you had one, you were talking about the objective standards. What item or which program is that?
Sorry, I didn't mark it. I was looking at it earlier.
Is it 91A?
Yeah, it's in at the end. Right. So just further developing phase 2. And so we've had phase 1 in place for several years, and I expressed it last time. My concern is that each year, I think Greg said, we've had an average of about maybe three large multifamily housing units get approved, and we've seen, and they're fairly large ones on key sites in the downtown. My concern is that if the housing bills from the state have already in effect, and if we put this off, that we're missing opportunities. Although I understand it's a big work item.
Yeah, okay. Can staff walk through, so right now the completion date is 2026. So what I'm hearing, Commissioner Sturm, is that you're kind of asking, is this a timeline that can be bumped sooner?
Right,
that
but
what
I'm
you're
also
asking?
remembering that part of phase 2 was addressing the upzoning at BART. Is that right? Or is that separate? We were going to draw when we were talking about the upzoning at BART, we were going to try to draw on what was already done with the phase 1 objective standards and how it could be applied to the higher density at the BART site.
Phase 2 could apply to BART or not. I think it remains to be seen. The direction from the council last Monday night was to prepare some draft regulations for zoning, land use, height, density, and draw from the existing phase 1 objective standards to see what could be applicable to the BART site, just so that we have kind of baseline standards in as opposed to nothing. And so yes, phase 2 it is planned and on the books. We don't want to overpromise and under-deliver, and just considering current staffing. We too would like to move it earlier, and we'll do so if that's feasible. We do have the phase 1 standards in effect, and yeah, there've been one to two projects in the downtown per year, I think, on average. And we've applied those, and so and we've also gone through design review for each of those to some degree. So yes, we agree, and we'll move it forward sooner if feasible to do that. But the phase 2 was kind of separate from the efforts to address AB 2923 on BART.
Okay. Your tentative scheduling for phase 2 is assuming there's going to be some kind of subcommittee that staff works with? Okay. I was
Yes.
just wondering if there's a way to capture resources from volunteers to help, but I know it's a lot for you guys.
Having served on the phase 1, do you recall how long it took to kind of get to the end of the phase 1? Would you estimate a
think
year?
we had no, I mean, well, we were trying to get it done by a certain time. I feel like it was, I want to say it was a couple months. I mean, I feel like it was short, but maybe I'm misremembering. I could probably look back and find my notes. I feel like
it
we
was
did
a
on a,
rush.
yeah, we did it on a very short timeline.
Okay, yeah, I don't recall the timeframe, but we can go back. And
It could have been like, I think it was like 2 to 3 months, probably more like 3 months.
I think it was linked to SB 35
Mhm.
implementation.
Well, I think we can absolutely take that note forward and we'll look again at the schedule, but there are many programs and so I guess between the planning commission and the council, we're happy to reorder them as appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Sturm, did you have any others that you wanted to touch on? Okay, thank you. Commissioner Mason or Commissioner Farzan, did you have anything you would like to comment on this? I'm seeing no from Commissioner Mason.
Yeah, mine were included from the last time, so thank you.
Okay. I also do not have anything additional. I think, so what they're looking for, what staff is looking for is, let me just pull it up to see the wording. They would like to forward a recommendation to the city council. So based on the feedback that we were providing on item 3.1C, I guess I'd be looking for thoughts on, is the planning commission comfortable seeing this item on the consent calendar and using the direction and the feedback that we've provided to staff tonight? Or would we like to see this item again? I personally am comfortable seeing it on the consent calendar, but I know there were strong opinions on this item. So if anyone would like to see it again, maybe chime in. Okay, so it sounds like Sarah, if you feel you have enough guidance, or I guess staff, if staff feels there's been enough guidance provided tonight for item 3.1C, we'd be comfortable with it coming on the consent calendar. And do you need a motion for us to make a recommendation to city council, or is this discussion enough right here?
So if you're ready to pass it on to city council with, sort of with those edits, then I would recommend a motion. If you're not quite ready, then we can make those edits, put it on consent, and then that would be recommendation on the consent.
My bad. Okay. What I meant to say was exactly what Sarah just said. If we would like to see this again, we will put it on consent. If people are comfortable with staff moving forward with tonight's direction, I would welcome somebody to make a motion to forward this on to city council. Commissioner Farzan, I see your hand up. Is that a question?
No, I was going to make a motion.
Okay, before you do, Commissioner or Vice Chair Labange, I see your hand up. Is that a question?
No, or maybe I can just ask, and then it wasn't a question, but I was leaning towards wanting to see a consent. So can we talk it through so we're on the same page? The way I saw it is with it coming back as consent, right? We would see it, we would be able to review it before a meeting, and then if everyone's fine, then at that meeting we would just pass it through consent. If there are issues, we could pull it back then. And for that, we don't need a motion tonight, right? Because so I would prefer that we bring it back and have the option of it being approved through consent or reviewed if there's an issue with it. Since I think are some items we would want to see what comes back. That's where I am.
Okay. Thank you. And Commissioner Farzan, were you thinking that, or were you thinking of making a motion?
I'm yanking back the motion I was about to make because that was the opposite. So I can go either way. I thought at least the comments that were made were clear enough where the changes could be made, but I understand this is important. So completely open to it coming back on the consent. I was comfortable with it going straight to the city council, but I understand it.
Yes, and I apologize because the way I was communicating it was not clear because I was not understanding. So I too am comfortable with it going on to city council, but I do respect that a couple of planning commissioners had very strong feelings about this. So I will just put it out there. If you're wanting to make a motion to move it on without it being on consent calendar, please make that motion now. If not, we will have it come to us on consent calendar with tonight's suggested revisions. Okay, not seeing a motion. Sarah, we would like to please do the item on consent with the comments included tonight or discussed tonight.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for helping me through that one. Okay. Item 7A, new public hearing. So this is for the sixth cycle housing element update draft EIR public comment meeting. And so tonight we're going to conduct a public hearing to receive verbal public comment on the draft EIR. Those comments will then be responded to in the final EIR. I do just want to take a second to acknowledge that there's a lot going on. I also am the Planning Commission liaison on GPAC, and there's a lot of public comment regarding opportunity sites. We've also received a lot of comment regarding opportunity sites, where development should be, where development maybe should not be in the city, opinions and thoughts and comments on density. So tonight, though, this portion is specifically to provide comment on the draft environmental impact report. So I also see Mr. Evans has joined tonight, and I will hand it over to you, Sarah, and staff for staff report and presentation.
Yes, and for those who don't know, Luke Evans is with ESA. He's part of our environmental consulting team, and he'll be here to receive comments as well. So I'll go ahead and just do a brief presentation, and then we can move into receiving comments. So we'll just go quickly over timelines. We'll talk about the steps in the environmental review process, just a little bit about CEQA, things to remember as we're looking at this. We'll kind of clarify the meeting focus for this evening, and then our recommendation. So you've seen this before. This is a housing element timeline. It's complex. There's lots of different moving parts. As I mentioned, we're in section 2 with the Planning Commission, but what we're looking at right now in this item is the CEQA aspect. So we are within that 45-day public review period. We've released a draft environmental document. Then we will evaluate, we'll receive comments, we'll evaluate and respond to those comments, and that will be incorporated in the final EIR. So I will note that based on our joint session, City Council requested an extension of time for public review. So we have extended that to April 18th from April 4th, and we've also added an additional public comment meeting where we will receive public comments on April 4th. So just kind of a big picture overview of the CEQA process. There's a notice of preparation, which kind of helps define the scope of what we're analyzing. Then there's the analysis that happens and a draft EIR, which has all of that analysis and conclusions. We are in that period right now. And then once the public comment period closes for that portion, we will prepare responses, and that is included in the final EIR. So just some key dates as it relates to CEQA. So if you'll recall, we had a scoping session or scoping period between July 30th and September 2nd. And then on August 16th, we actually held a public meeting specifically for the scoping to make sure that what we were studying was adequate. On February 18th, we released the draft EIR. On February 28th, we held a joint session with City Council, Planning Commission, and GPAC to kind of go over the findings from the draft EIR and also publicize the availability of it. Tonight is the March 7th public comment meeting, which again, we're receiving, it's a sort of a listening session. We're receiving comments from the public to be responded to in the final EIR. As I mentioned, we've added a public comment session with Planning Commission, so a second meeting on April 4th. And then the end of public comment period is April 18th, extended from the 4th. So I'll remind everyone that an email or a letter or any other public comments can be submitted and will also be responded in the final EIR, but these two sessions are where we will receive verbal comment. Again, just a brief overview, CEQA is really meant to analyze the potential environmental impacts of a given project. The project in this case is the housing element update. It's meant to avoid, reduce, or prevent environmental damage where possible. And it provides provides information to decision makers, but it's not a decision making. It's not a decision tool in and of itself. It's not an approval document. It's more of an informational tool, and it's also meant to help ensure that we comply with the law. I'm sure you all have read the environmental impact report and saw that this is what's in there. There's a summary, a project description, the environmental setting, sort of the baseline information. You'll also find the environmental impacts that were found, significant environmental impacts, any mitigation measures, project alternatives, and then also cumulative impacts are studied in the document. And again, there is a summary of all of the findings because it is quite a lengthy document, but there is a summary to help focus the findings. These are all the topics that were covered in the analysis. So that these are really typical of what's included in an EIR, but just as a reminder. And then also as a reminder, there are several levels of impacts. So there's no impact, less than significant with mitigation, and significant and unavoidable. Just want to remind everyone that if there is a significant and unavoidable impact, it means that there's an adverse change in the environment that cannot be avoided, even if we implement mitigation measures. This doesn't mean that the project can't move forward. It's just, again, an information tool. And the City Council may be required to adopt a statement of overriding considerations. This project is so important or required that we must move forward. Again, want to mention the difference between a draft EIR and a final EIR. Draft is what you see before you. It has all the analysis and conclusions. The final is sort of somewhat disappointing in that it's just the response to comments that we received during this public comment period. So just to clarify what that means. Our meeting focus for tonight are really comments on the draft EIR. We're not commenting on the project itself, so the housing element itself. We're commenting on sort of the resources that were analyzed in the EIR, the level of analysis in the EIR, and the conclusions in the EIR. So this evening, we're asking the Planning Commission to receive comments from the public regarding the draft EIR, and those will be responded to in the final EIR. In terms of next steps, as I mentioned, we have that April 4th meeting, which is the second meeting to receive comments. Again, a listening session, so we're not going to be responding verbally to comments this evening, but we will be documenting, taking notes, and we'll respond in the final EIR. And then the April 18th is the end of the public comment period, and we will begin preparation of the final EIR. Luke and I are available for questions if you have any.
Thank you. I will remind planning commissioners as well as the public, there is a GPAC meeting tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. So if you do have a comment that you would wish to share that is not directly related to tonight's item, which again, tonight's item is for comments specific to the CEQA analysis, the findings that are presented in the draft EIR. But let's just say you have a comment maybe on a site that you think should be considered as an opportunity site or a portion of the city that should be excluded from upzoning. Just say the GPAC meeting tomorrow night at 6 is a perfect platform to share those comments. So first we'll start by asking specific questions, clarifying questions to staff. Commissioner Mason.
Yeah, to follow up on what you said, I'm not sure if this is a fair question or what, but going from page 4.3-14, which is basically references the municipal tree protection. I don't see how that can be made to work with the zone 8. the Deer Hill. I don't know if this is within the bounds of what we're looking at here or not. So I figured I would just toss it out because that area is just, especially across from BART, is just too heavily wooded to have any remediation as detailed in our municipal code.
I'm flipping there, 4.3-8. So this is in the bio section? Is that what you're saying, page 4.3-8?
Commissioner Mason, you're muted.
Sorry, 4.3-14, which cross-references the municipal code, the tree protection ordinance.
So under the regulatory setting. So, sorry, what is your question?
The question is, this isn't part of the RENA analysis, as you stated, and that's correct. But if we're looking at the draft EIR and the Deer Hill is one of the mitigation areas because of the proximity to BART, I don't know how that area, especially the area across the street from BART, can comply with the our Lafayette tree protection ordinance, because it's just too heavily wooded. And it's more of now a choice between either one is an unavoidable negative, a non-mitigatable reaction. So I wasn't sure how that was on, or this is even relevant because it's part of the RENA analysis.
Yeah, I think so. Mr. Evans, sorry to put you on the spot here, but I think what might be helpful is maybe the 15-second high level of how a given resource section is structured. So I know there's the environmental setting, the methodology, the impacts and mitigation. Can you just maybe go at a really high level of just walk us through a generic section, because that might help provide clarity for these types of questions?
Sure, yeah. So the way we usually start out with these, and these all the topical section EIR sections are structured similarly. The first thing we do is we lay out the existing conditions related to that particular issue. So for instance, for biology, which is the topic that Commissioner Mason brought up, we lay out what kind of vegetation's in the project area, what type of special status species we could potentially expect to find in that area, et cetera. So that's the existing conditions. That's in other words, that's kind of what's there now. Then we talk about regulations that are applicable to that particular topic. And so the listing that we had there for the tree ordinance is really simply just a kind of a listing of the types of regulations they're applicable to biological resources, including trees. So there's regulations related to special status wildlife, for instance, endangered species, some kind of special status plants, wildlife, et cetera. And there's regulations related to trees, there's regulations related to wetlands and waters of the United States, et cetera. So we lay all that out. And then we get into the impact analysis, which is where we talk about what's going to happen to all those existing conditions we just talked about if the project is implemented. And that's where we determine if there's going to be an impact one way or the other. So, and our impact analysis always assumes that any applicable regulations would be implemented as a matter of course. And then if it's still significant, if the impact would still be significant based on the defined thresholds, then we would prescribe mitigation. And in most cases, we can, as you can probably see in the EIR, in most situations, the impacts have been determined to be less than significant, either with mitigation or without. So that's kind of the high level overview. Is there anything else you want me to talk about there?
No, okay. I appreciate that. And so Commissioner Mason's, I guess the question is for staff then. Is there, or Commissioner Mason, was that, I know that didn't get into like a direct response, but you're saying that anything on Deer Hill is going to have a problem meeting the city's tree ordinance?
It was, whoops, it was more of a question that it's, well, first of all, I'm not sure if this is a fair question at this point. It's, the Deer Hill was a potential mitigation for something else. But if you put essentially the higher density housing in Deer Hill, I'm not sure that the tree ordinances can be mitigated. So essentially, is it, and this is more for staff, it's one mitigation, you know, it's dueling non-mitigatable situations. And, you know, maybe it can, I just don't see it. And how is that handled? Does that automatically take it off? Does it, you just, is one situation not as bad as the other? That's how I was just trying to look, because we're presented with a whole bunch of circumstances, but there's no ranking of them as far as, hey, this mitigation isn't as bad, this unmitigatable situation is not as bad as a different unmitigatable circumstance. And I guess that's the whole question that I wanted to ask.
So to my knowledge, there is not a order of priority or a hierarchy of the different impacts. And to my knowledge, the Deer Hill site, and are you speaking about a specific parcel or the entirety of Area 8?
Well, mostly the portion of Area 8 right opposite the BART station itself.
Okay, thank you. That is not a mitigation measure under CEQA. It is certainly one site that staff has identified as a potential area that could be zoned to accommodate some of the statutory RENA requirements. So we are obliged under state law and through the RENA allocation to plan for a minimum of 2,114 units over the next 8 years plus buffer. And so it's very much up to the city as to how to solve and plan for those units. And so one option studied in the EIR is the downtown only. So the new units would essentially almost exclusively go in the current boundaries of the downtown. But another is the distributed scenario, which could include the BART parking lots and the Deer Hill corridor. And if there is a particular site which has, let's say 100% tree cover, that is not a basis for not allowing some land use on that property. The property owner has certain rights. And so the city, wants to see trees preserved, but understands that in order to reach other goals like providing housing or parks, that sometimes trees need to be removed, and the ordinance allows for that. And mitigation can take the form of planting new trees or paying into a Inlieu fund if they can't accommodate them on site, so that trees could be planted elsewhere. An offsite mitigation, if you will. So that we're not seeing a conflict in the city's ability to implement its tree protection ordinance and accommodate RENA.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Mason, did you have other questions? Okay. Any other questions for staff? Commissioner Farson?
Not a question really for staff, but just something if you want to let the community know, once there's a final EIR, is there going to be another follow-up meeting to go over the final EIR? Mostly I'm asking because those are the questions that kind of come in. So I'm just opening the floor to that.
So we will be having a meeting. So having public, like this public meeting is not required. We are having it to take comment. We are taking comment on April 4th, again, from the public. Members of the public can provide written comment through 5 o'clock on the now extended date of April 18th, which is 2 weeks beyond the required 45 days. And so the next would then be at the certification hearing itself at the city council meeting, correct? And that's when people and the public could comment on the final EIR. Is the city going to be having any additional meetings beyond that?
I don't know that any are scheduled today, but certainly the final EIR would be made public. There'd be opportunity for the public to review that and all of the responses to the comments that were provided on the draft EIR and any errata or changes made to the draft. And then the city is obliged to certify it, which in so doing, the planning commission and the council would make certain findings under CEQA that essentially say that it is adequate under CEQA. So we don't have that scheduled as yet.
Okay. And thank you, Commissioner Person. Good.
Thank you, because I know the questions are going to come up. So
yeah, perfect. Okay. Seeing no other questions for staff, if we could please open it up for public comment. So again, a reminder, these are public comments on the draft EIR itself, the CEQA analysis, the findings, which are the conclusions of the different resource sections and impact questions. If you have a comment on maybe opportunity site you would like to see, site you would like to not see considered, the GPAC meeting tomorrow night is a great platform for that, 6 o'clock. So I will hand it over to staff if there's any public comment.
If you would like to make a public comment on the EIR, the draft environmental impact report, go ahead and hit the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen, or hit *9 if you're calling in, and you'll be invited in as a panelist to offer your comments for up to 3 minutes. There will be another opportunity on April 4th, and you can submit a written comment until close of business April 18. So seeing none. No hands are raised, Chair.
Okay. I'm just gonna give it to 30 more seconds, just in case.
One hand is raised. Robert Lavoie, you're going to come in and be invited to offer your comments. Welcome, Robert Lavoie. We can see you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Got the camera working. And thank you to Commissioner Maggio for reminding me 2 of the other complaints I have about electricity, which is the recent unreliability of the network and coming from fossil fuels sometimes. Okay, quickly, because I have a whole bunch of stuff here. The most important thing I heard at the last review meeting with the City Council was that if we retain our current zoning, which I think is already excessive, at 52 units an acre with density bonuses, we can minimize the additional adverse and unavoidable impacts of the worst case scenario that was given to the consultants. So that's good. And I think we should work very hard to make sure that we keep it at the current density. Elliot and I have been looking at some spreadsheets and using staff's spreadsheet and a reasonable yield. I think we can meet the outrageous RENA goals with the existing zoning and the without increasing, using the distributed model. So it's important that we don't increase the current zoning and create more problems that we can avoid. I had some questions on some of the conclusions. In the biological resources, they don't make any mention of the loss of greenery when lots are covered within 5 feet of the lot line with this high density housing. That's obviously going to increase greenhouse gas and reduce plant volume. It also results in the loss of sunlight for neighbors when you go from a 35-foot to 50-foot maximum building height, which is what we're seeing for projects like 950 Huff, which maximizes their density. I see that they make an unsubstantiated claim that mandating electrification. Okay, we talked about that already, so I'm not going to read that. In the high growth scenario required to meet the RENA allocations, it would increase the school populations by their admission between 970 and 1,000 students. I don't know where they got that number from. If I use the 2020 census, 4.5% of the population is under 5 and 25% under 18. So 21% are in school age. At 3,500 new housing units, 2.78 people per household. I get a 10,000 new population, which would come up with 2,500 around to 2,000 to 2,500 kids. So that would be like 79 to 100 new classrooms that would be required. And that's a significant issue that I think is not going to be covered by the the access fees.
Thank you, Mr. Lavoie. I know this is a very sensitive topic, so I don't want to be rude. I do also want to be mindful of others who are giving comments. So
can you give me just 30 seconds to?
Yeah, one more point would be appreciated for 30 seconds. Thank you.
Water use is a concern. If we're already being forced into drought restrictions, what if we increase our population by 40 to 50%? And then, yeah, oh, and the parkland, with all these new housing units, that would generate 10,000 new residents and require 52 new acres of parkland, which we're already trying to grab for housing. So anyway, that's what I got for now.
Thank you.
I'll submit written comments.
Perfect. Thank you. Commissioner Farsan, I see your hand up.
Yeah, can I just ask a quick, just clarifying question of Mr. Lavoie? When you said the density at the beginning, you went side to side a little bit, so I want to make sure. Were you saying density in the downtown only plan?
No, what I'm talking about is, it's my understanding that, well, everywhere that there's currently 35 minimum density, which is 52 with the bonuses. And I believe that's all the way across Mount Diablo Boulevard and the southern part of the downtown too, that gets down to O'Connor Street, where it turns into single family. So, but I wouldn't recommend upzoning Deer Hill. It's right next to single family neighborhoods all over the place, and it's the high fire zone. And I don't think we need the units.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lavoie. I'll look to staff. Do we have any other speakers on this item?
If you would like to speak on this item, please go ahead and raise your hand now. Seeing none.
Okay. With that, we will go ahead and close public comment on the draft EIR and bring it back to the Planning Commission for discussion. I'm happy to start, but I would love to hear from other commissioners first. Okay, Vice Chair LaBonge.
One thing that I was wondering, and I'm not positive this is the right point, but I'll put it out there. And I think the GPAC meeting tomorrow, this might come up, and I'm traveling, so I won't be able to attend. Figure 4.1-5, which is on page 100 and page 101, are representations of like density of houses or of developments. And I appreciate those, but I do think I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I find it very difficult to envision what these two different developments would look like, and generic developments, right? Because we don't know what they're going to look like. But with the increased densities, what they could potentially do, especially the downtown one, which will concentrate density in a more core area versus the distributed. So I was wondering if there was a way, and I think I mentioned this last time, to take kind of your average density, and how you define that, I don't know, but I think I gave you some example last time of your average unit size and number of units per acre. And we're able to do sort of a block massing model so that, you know, the public or people, or maybe just me, could say, okay, this version has the potential to really put this kind of density in the downtown, and it could potentially be like this in a very graphical, in your face massing visual versus the distributed. So I guess I would just ask for either Greg, I know you look like you have it, and then maybe Luke, if there's a way to show that so people could really see how this could impact, and then maybe make a more informed feedback from people.
Yes, so we have engaged ESA and they are working on that as we speak. So it is in progress, and we will be bringing it forward to you. And essentially, this is three-dimensional modeling. We would call it kind of serial box. It's not going to be detailed buildings, but just kind of simple building forms that will cover kind of the spectrum of potential from the existing 35 dwelling units per acre to a middle ground, probably of 50. And then I think 75 is the highest we're looking at the downtown at this point. The EIR, I think, contemplated potentially up to 115 units, but through the GPAC efforts and very much as a because the public has been participating and we've been able to identify additional sites. More sites means that we don't have to, that the necessary density would be lower in the downtown. So the short answer is the massing models are currently being prepared.
And thank you. When would those, what part of the process do those come up so that the review, you know, before decisions are made? Just when they're ready, I guess, or is it a specifically coming up at a certain checkpoint?
Not a specific checkpoint, but as soon as they're ready, we'll bring them to you, and I would imagine that's going to be just within a matter of weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Mason.
Yeah, just to follow up on what LaBonge asked, you know, my experience has been, you know, massing models are nice, but what I thought might be more helpful is just reach out to some of the neighboring jurisdictions, Walnut Creek, Pleasant Hill, and just identify some sites. This is a 75 per unit per acre project. I mean, anybody wants, you know, that whole area around the Pleasant Hill BART or some of the downtown Walnut Creek projects. So people can actually see them, because looking at the sense of looking at it just on the massing, you don't get the feel for what it's like to be on the sidewalk in front of them. You know, the shade that they generate and things like that. And that, I think, would give people a better, honest feel, because the last thing we want to do is give them something and they agree to it, And I said, hey, well, wait a second, this isn't what I thought we were doing. So anyway, that would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Perfect. So correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing doesn't sound like a comment on the aesthetics portion of the CEQA document, but more of a request for, as we move through and identify specific sites, to be able to see in different areas of the city, to be able to see visually what it looks like, a visual representation of density in these different portions, rather than a comment on the aesthetics section, right?
Yes and no. Yes, it's a comment on aesthetics, but you can't really address the aesthetics separate from the impact of the project, shade, noise, how it blocks views, things like that. It's one thing to see, one of the things is, hey, it will block views of hilltops. Well, but if you're on the street and you're across the street and you still can't see over it, that's something you can only see if you are, walking by a project and really seeing what the impact is. And that's where I was trying to get, is from a theoretical impact to how people really react in the situation where you're standing right by the project. Thanks.
Okay. And Mr. Evans, to also put you on the spot again, can you also just give us the 30-second, because I think this is, going to be applicable for people watching as well, the 30-second overview of programmatic EIR versus project specific. And after this, if a given project is proposed, just say in the downtown or within an area of the city, analyzed even within this programmatic EIR, if you could just walk us through when another project specific CEQA analysis would be required that would look at those types of specifics.
I will answer that, but Greg may want to weigh in, because some of these are going to be potentially by right projects, and so their CEQA analysis may be a little bit more limited. But yeah, so the program level analysis we have here is really casting a wide net and making some assumptions about what could happen. We don't have a specific project in front of us right now. I think most of us are used to EIRs where it's about, for instance, the Terraces project, which I know is one that came up recently in the city. A specific project, you can really look and see exactly, you make a lot of determinations based on the specific nature of that project and what's proposed. And you can really nail in the impacts, and you can really know what's going to happen. With this program level document, it's a little bit tougher, because you're really looking at you're making general assumptions about what could possibly happen. You've kind of creating an envelope of potential effects. So I don't know if that answers the question effectively, Commissioner, but that's kind of what we're looking at here with this EIR.
Yeah, I think it's helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
Before I jump to Commissioner Sturm, Commissioner Mason, is your hand up again, or is that from before?
Sorry. Yes, I meant to put it down, but yes, where I was trying to go with that whole line of questioning is in looking at going forward, it's separating out an isolated project from a whole wall of projects, a whole mile of projects at 75 units per acre, all along the same side of Mount Diablo, on and on and on. And that's where I'm a little bit less comfortable following up on what your side, this portion of the EIR versus a programmatic per project, because I think it's the isolated project we'll live with, but the cumulative effect of everything is where my greater concern is. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, so Mr. Evans, are cumulatives looked at in a programmatic EIR?
They are, and in the EIR, we looked at this cumulative issue quite carefully, because the city has design standards and that determine how things are supposed to look and how things are supposed to be structured. And that's kind of one of the things that I was referring to earlier, is that some projects will have to go through design review, I assume, and some may not, based on specific requirements within the city code and also the specific attributes of the project as proposed. But generally speaking, there would be another opportunity as projects are presented, as the specific applicant comes in and presents the project, there would be another opportunity for more environmental review. So this is not the last bite at the apple, because it is so general. And the assumption is that most of these projects, if not all of them, larger ones especially, would have to go through another round of project-specific environmental review, during which time a lot of those impacts could be looked at carefully. For instance, how is this building going to fit in with what's already there, or other projects that are in the pipeline that could follow that might, cumulatively have an effect. So there is another bite at the apple, another opportunity to look at many of these projects, if that's helpful.
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Sturm, I saw you had your hand up.
I didn't have any questions. I was just going to try to assist in clarifying what Commissioner Mason was asking for. I thought he was asking for, when we're looking at making a decision about densities, making sure that as part of our public outreach, that people understand what different densities can feel like at a street level. And because I actually don't have really any comments or questions on this as a part of our process. I think it's done well, and it is general, as you've been highlighting. The section that I sort of zeroed in on was the aesthetics, because from what I've heard from public feedback so far, it seems like people are really, their top concern is the character of Lafayette. So I think having people understand what different densities feel like is important. And then back to the sort of bird's eye massing models to further convey what density would look like in these two different projects that are studied in the DEAR. Well, I have some ideas, but I was wondering if staff could speak to what the strategy is, and maybe this isn't a question for tonight if it's not necessarily part of the EIR, but I was just thinking, for me, deciding on the density is going to depend on what those models look like. And this document is shown that, for the most part, that the impacts are either there's significant and unavoidable impacts, or there's not. And the project, the distributed or the downtown project doesn't have a huge impact on that.
Yeah, and I'll just add, so CEQA is just one thing that's considered, right? Like when a project is being considered, just because the CEQA document, just really simplify, but let's just say a CEQA document says, yeah, there's no environmental impacts on project A, doesn't mean that that's automatic approval of the project. So where I was trying to go was, I was hearing what Vice Chair LeBlanc was saying, and Commissioner Mason, and I know Commissioner Sturm, you brought this up in a couple of meetings prior, and I know on GPAC it's also been brought up, the request to see kind of the massing models in the different areas. So it sounds like that is something that ESA is moving forward with, and it sounds like that will be available in the next couple of weeks. So is that something, staff, that will be presented, I'm guessing maybe to GPAC first, because the chance of the GPAC meeting, right now we're meeting weekly, right? So is that, would it probably come to GPAC first and then be presented at a planning commission meeting? Or can you maybe help walk us through, I know you don't have the set timeline right now, so not to put you on the spot, but it sounds like that is definitely a tool that is going to be helpful for commissioners, the public, council members to be able to actually assess and go through and work through, where it makes sense to have increased density if that's the direction the city goes.
So we anticipate the massing models will be completed after GPAC makes its recommendation in just a few weeks. But what the suggestion by Commissioner Mason of identifying specific projects that are built at different densities, and so they could be viewed in Google Street View or visited. We have provided those to GPAC, and we can provide those to the Planning Commission as well, and make them, they are publicly available, but trying to make them as accessible as possible. And we can potentially even reach out further and identify even in more projects. But the small caveat of building form and appearance is not a one-to-one correlation with respect to density. So you could have fewer bigger units in that same volume or more smaller units. So building form and appearance is, there's some correlation, but it's not a one-to-one with density.
Commissioner Sturm?
So since ESA is going to be working on these models, I guess my what I was starting to think through was, I know we talked about this before, how density is units per acre, and depending on whether they're studios or 3-bedroom apartments, that determines the massing as well as the zoning regulations. And I guess I feel like the way that staff and ESA go about making this model is pretty critical. I was just off the top of my head, I was thinking, well, you could, sort of pick a middle ground, model that, pick a maximum build out, model that, and then add on the density bonus. Like, I think it would be helpful. I don't know if the plan was to create one model that was, sort of picking that middle ground, or if there's going to be variability.
We would, there will be variability. And so even just for the downtown, the modeling would have 35 dwelling units per acre, 50 units per acre, and 75 units per acre to see kind of the visual differences between those. There will absolutely need to be assumptions made around each of those in terms, not so much the current zoning, which is the maximum height is well established, but the height limits for 50 and 75 units per acre, about unit size, et cetera. And so, but the intention was to kind of show a spectrum, and then even if not specifically one of those densities, but something in between were ultimately chosen, they would still be informative to the viewer.
But there will be one massing per density allocation, not showing the range that could be accommodated by different densities. Sorry. So you're going to have one model for 35 units per acre in the downtown, as opposed to showing well, this is what 35 units per acre would look like with this housing type versus this other larger housing type.
Correct. It would be kind of uniform across the planning area, not based on a different unit type at a given density. So it just multiplies out the number of models to do it with multiple different form factors for the same density.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other commissioners wishing to provide just discussion on the EIR? Commissioner Farsan?
I just have just a very general question for Mr. Evans. And again, if I missed this, and I'll be honest with you, I've gone through this, but about speed reading, to be completely honest, I will go through it slower because everyone will. But for me, very quick reading through this. The BART potential building comes up regularly, right? It's addressed here, etc. But one of the things I haven't seen, I think I've brought this up before, is there anything in the analysis that says transportation will continue at X rate versus Y rate? And this is the point I'm making. Right now, hardly anybody takes BART because we're in the COVID period, right? When before it was jammed. when you got to the Lafayette station. So I'm just saying, because that affects the number of cars parked versus driving versus et cetera. And that affects traffic, noise, pollution throughout, depending on who rides BART, who doesn't ride BART. Does that question make sense? Is that part of the analysis to look? Is it only looking at this point in time versus what it would look like in 5, 10, 15, 20 years? Does that general question make sense to you? And you can tell me if it doesn't. I'm not going to be offended.
No, I think I understand what you're asking. As far as a traffic analysis goes, now we did not look at BART ridership as part of this. That wasn't within our scope, and really wouldn't fit with this project anyway. But as far as the transportation analysis in general goes, we did assume, our traffic counts, for instance, were pre-COVID, because we wanted to have a good idea of what things really were in the real world. And as things return back to normal, and people hopefully will start getting back on BART and things like that, things will kind of reset, and that's the hope. But of course, the traffic model is set up to create a growth factor. The assumption is there's going to be more cars every year, and there's going to be more people, et cetera. And so the model actually does have that built into it. And so there is a growth factor that's built into it. And that is typically established by the Transportation Authority in Contra Costa County. They have their own, we use their model, and it has the growth factor built into it. Does that answer your question? Seemed like you had more there. Was that?
No, that was generally it, but I was trying to also, like you said, it wasn't addressed here, but I mean, honestly, BART ridership makes a huge difference in our town, whether people are riding it or not, because most people who get to work used to take BART. No one's going on BART anymore. Even if they're going in the car, because people still don't feel comfortable getting on BART yet, right? So there's a big difference in terms of number of people in their cars versus on BART. And I understand that. I was just trying to get a sense that wasn't kind of what you looked at in that representation.
Well, part of the idea of, building development close to the BART station is, incentivize people to get on the train, of course. So,
right.
And providing higher density in those locations, the idea is that it would incentivize people to use BART and take cars off the road. So of course, this. I'm not.
Yeah, no, that's exactly the point I'm trying to make. That's the thought process, right? You build it there, but if people are still not wanting to get on BART, or they're working from home, then you kind of lose that incentive of saying it's here, go ride BART. So,
yes.
But thank you. That answers my question.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
You bet.
Thank you, Commissioner Parson. Anyone else? Go ahead, Commissioner Sturm.
I was just thinking about Commissioner Farson's comment question. So the Contra Costa's model, like traffic model that's used as the basis for the traffic section of REIR, is looking at trends in past years. But then the other thing to think about, the way the pandemic has affected us, is a lot of companies have sold their office space and have committed to keeping their employees at home. So is that just an unknown that we're not able to account for, and we're just going to keep going with projections that were set from these patterns over the last 10 years? And if things become, if the traffic situation is more favorable because traffic is diminished by people working from home, then so be it.
Well, I think we'd all have to admit that things have changed, and the future around these types of issues is somewhat uncertain, especially as it relates to the way we all worked 2 years ago, and how we got to work and how we went to the office, et cetera. I haven't been to the office in 2 years, so as many other folks have, and I drive 4,000 miles a year versus 15 now. So that's pretty significant drop. But I guess the assumption is that at some point things are going to reset. Now, what that's going to look like, we don't know. I'm sure there's lots of commercial real estate investors out there that would sure like to know the answer to that too, because as you said, a lot of office spaces are closing down, and people are assuming that more people are going to work from home. But at this point, I believe we pretty much had to go with the model that we've been using, you know, and it's established and is known, versus speculating on some future that we really can't predict. So that's where we're at currently. Greg, do you want to add something?
Well, just to my knowledge, you know, there's kind of a long trend line for traffic and congestion. And to my knowledge, the CCTA's long-term model has not been revised based on COVID, but if anything, it just kind of pressed a little bit of a pause button on the kind of inevitable increase. So using the CCTA model would produce more conservative estimates of higher traffic volumes. So again, from a CEQA standpoint and what we do budget-wise and CEQA-wise is to be very, very conservative in the analysis.
Good point, Greg. Thank you. You said that better than I did. Appreciate that.
Commissioner Mason.
Thank you. I'd like to kind of follow up on Commissioner Farzan's comments, but come at it from a different angle. Is your model based on maintaining the current parking ratios? Because one of the things we're seeing, even on the smaller projects, parking governs a lot. The densities, what can be built. I know that San Francisco, for example, has maximum parking ratios. They've taken the attitude if you build it, they will come. And if you don't provide parking, they are going to have to find other areas. That also would impact EV charging because, you know, you do the car stacking, you can get more cars in a smaller area, but that affects your EV charge, you know, ability to charge for EVs. So I was wondering how that influenced your models, or if it was just something that it's a wild card and not considered. Thank you.
Parking is not a CEQA issue any longer, so we didn't really evaluate parking impacts. In fact, we didn't. But Greg, I know that there is some, I mean, the city has its own parking standards, and I don't know what those are precisely, but you know, to what extent are projects allowed to deviate from those standards? Maybe you can just provide a little discussion on that, little overview.
Sure. Projects are required to meet the code. In recent past, projects have been exceeding the minimum code requirements to attend to their constituency. The people who they would like to sell the units to would like to have more parking than what the city minimum requires. At the same time, those parking standards can be waived or reduced based on a project's density bonus status. So it really is a mixed bag, and we don't have a long trend line to project forward at this point. So things are a little bit in flux.
Commissioner Mason.
Yeah, because what I was asking is, I realize parking isn't a CEQA issue, but what we're seeing in some of the other bigger jurisdictions is they're going more towards the East Coast model of buildings. It's the one-off. If you have just fewer parking, you have fewer cars, which means you have less particulate matter, less noise, and everything else that's associated with traffic. I was wondering if that was just something that's beyond the scope of, you know, what you're able to study, or, you know, is it something that you never will have enough information to study?
If it relates to greenhouse gases, then certainly I think the the proximity to transit is factored in, and as well along with vehicle miles traveled, which is the standard for CEQA documents at this point. We're disallowed from factoring into CEQA level of service at intersections and can only rely on vehicle miles traveled under state law. So that is factored in, and the commensurate, I mean, the whole, I think, transition to VMT by the state is largely driven by reduction in greenhouse gases. So those are factored in given the proximity to work.
Thank you. Any other commissioner comments or discussion? I will say I did read, not every single page, but I did read every page of the impact analysis for each resource, executive summary, and I am a CEQA practitioner during the day, and I think this is a really well-written programmatic EIR. I personally find programmatic EIRs harder to write than project specific, and I would personally, if it were me, make the same findings that ESA made. So I'm not the CEQA practitioner on this one. I just wanted to share, I think it was a really well prepared document, and I know a lot of effort goes into it and a lot of review also goes into it. So just wanted to share that.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. Any other commissioner discussion items or discussion points on this one? Okay, so Sarah, I see I'm just looking on my other screen here. So a recommendation here, we're conducting a public hearing. We received verbal public comment on the draft EIR that we would like to see, or that people would like to be responded to in the final EIR. Is there anything additional you need from Planning Commission on this item for
Nothing.
tonight?
Nothing at this time.
Okay, then I think we can close this item and move on. So just a reminder, item 7B has been continued to, I think you said April 4th.
If we could have a formal motion on the following three items. So 7B is in boy, C is in Charlie, D is in Delta, and E is in Echo. If there was a motion to continue those to April 4, and then a roll call vote, we would appreciate it.
Okay, thank you for that reminder. Commissioner Maggio.
Yes, I'd like to move that we continue 7B, C, D, and E to April 4th.
Second.
Okay, thank you. So there was a motion by Commissioner Maggio and a second by Commissioner Farson, and we'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Farson,
Aye.
Commissioner Maggio,
Aye.
Commissioner Mason,
Aye.
Commissioner Sturm.
Aye.
Commissioner Labange
Aye.
and Chair Radich. Aye. So those four will be continued. Thank you. So now item on our current agenda, it's 7F, it's V10-21. Delaplane. This is for the R20 zoning request for variance. And the staff have, oh, sorry, Commissioner Farzan, go ahead.
May I request a 2-minute break before we move on, if that's okay with everyone?
Yeah, that's perfect. It's 9 o'clock, so 9:05.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. It is 9:07. Welcome back. So we're moving on to original agenda item 7F. This is V10-21 Delaplane. It's a request for a variance, and we have staff present, Nancy, to provide the staff report and a presentation.
Evening, Commissioners. The item before you is variance 10-21 for Delaplane, proposing to construct a 270 square foot, one-story addition onto an existing single-family residence that will be located within the required side yard setback at 1224 Rose Lane. The property is approximately half an acre and zone R20. Here's a site plan showing the proposed location and the proposed elevations. The addition will include an office, gym, and bathroom in the area of the existing 6-foot tall masonry courtyard enclosure, as seen in this picture, which is approximately 8.5 by 26 feet. The addition requires a side yard variance to reduce the required side yard from 20 feet to 9 feet 7 inches, and the aggregate side yard from 35 feet to 24 feet 7 inches. Since publication of the staff report, staff received 2 public comments, which were forwarded to the Commission earlier this afternoon. The first from Jonathan and Elizabeth Andren, 3714 Rose Court. They do not object to the variance. However, they wanted to understand whether the addition is visible from their property and express concern that the redwood tree roots may be impacted with the construction and may cause future damage to the property. Another was from Michael and Susie Cochran at 1220 Rose Lane. They expressed concern regarding impacts to the redwood roots and possible damage to their property. However, they prefer no addition, but ultimately will not object to the variance. Staff believes the variance standards cannot be met because the size, shape, topography, and other characteristics of the slot do not constitute a significant or unique constraint on reasonable development. Since this lot is regularly shaped, there are alternative areas where the addition may be constructed adjacent to the connecting space that would not require variance or would require less relief. Staff recommends the Commission direct staff to prepare a denial resolution for the next meeting. Following staff report publication, the applicant submitted a rebuttal response to staff analysis, which was forwarded to the Commission earlier today and also uploaded online. This concludes my presentation, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you. Are there any Commissioner clarifying questions for staff? Commissioner Sturm?
Where are you seeing, this question for staff, where are you seeing another opportunity for building an addition of this size within the allowed building area?
Towards the front.
Can you show me on the plan?
Sure. In this area? Are you seeing?
I realize I muted myself. Here, I have a picture. Can you pull up do you have an image of the entire front of the house?
It would be in front of this part of the house.
Okay. Okay. And then my next question, next and last question was in response to the neighbors' concern about the redwood trees, what would be the city's process for ensuring that the redwood trees are not disturbed if this were to go forward? Like, would we have our city consulting arborist, you know, put forth a distance from the trunk that
I did not forward this to the city arborist for a review because they weren't proposing any changes, but I can if this is continued.
Okay. Do you know offhand what the typical advice is on distance from the trunk of a redwood tree in order to avoid the root system?
Fortunately, I don't.
Okay. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioner questions for staff? Okay. With that, if we could please open it to public comment.
I'll bring in Tim Ward, who's the designer for the project.
Oh, right. Thank you.
And he'll have up to 10 minutes to present, may not take full 10.
Thank you.
And if anyone else is part of the applicant team, please go ahead and raise your hand and I will admit you. And then following the applicant's presentation, we will open it up for public comment. Mr. Delaplane, you are coming in as well. So Mr. Ward, you're in. I think we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Yes, I want to thank Nancy for all the work that she's done. But we were kind of surprised by this in the sense that starting in late November, all the way till 7 days ago, we had no idea that she was going to recommend a denial. And basically because we were looking at the findings, and I think I said to her, and I'm sure she sent on to you, our analysis of the findings, in the sense that the first finding, that this is a property that is constrained. We obviously are different than other lots because we have a 40-foot rear yard setback, mainly because of a sewer line. It's not a slope issue. It's not a issue of dimensions or anything like that. But this particular setback, I think, really limits where we can actually add a bathroom to an existing house where the master bedroom is. So I think that part of the first sort of finding, that this is unusual. Secondly, as we pointed out, and Nancy gave us the information, we have adjoining neighbors that had gotten variances for other reasons. Basically, I think she indicated to me that they were because of the arrangement of the lot sizes and the configurations of lots, and their variances is considerably more than what we are asking for in terms of percentage of setback lost or anything like that. And then thirdly, that the finding that this isn't appropriate for a R20 zoned property. There's no use that we're proposing that is anything but a single family residence. And it isn't like it's not been done in other areas. So I'm really kind of not quite sure why this isn't appropriate in an R20 zone. And likewise, when you see the property and you see this existing enclosure that's 6 feet high out of concrete, we don't think we're going to have to do any foundation work, because this wall is a concrete wall and we're building right up against it. So, our intent was it's sort of a natural place to go, because this wall is already at 12 feet into the setback as an enclosure and privacy area to the master bedroom. So I guess we're sort of kind of amazed that we haven't made those findings. That's something. I'm sure that Tom might have some more things to say, but that's basically what I think we have to hand out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Is your Mr. Delaplane, are you also speaking at this
Yes.
point?
Can you
Okay.
hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Yep. Well, first of all, two of the neighbors are concerned about my redwoods. I've got 7 on one side and 6 on the other side. I don't know of anybody that cares more about trees than I do. I have an arborist that annually hits our house, charges quite a bit of money just to survey all of our trees. One thing about this design that we've done is that we're not taking out any trees, and I wouldn't do this if it harms the redwoods. I understand that. I had him look at the redwoods and tell me, is there any risk? And he says, as long as we're not drilling down, to put in footings, because the footings are already there. So I don't believe that the redwoods are a problem from that perspective. And on a personal note, the bathroom that we have, the master bathroom that we have, for whatever reason, was undersized to the size of this house. And our biggest concern, and the reason why I'm doing this, my wife has arthritis, and I need to put in a tub, and there's no room to put a tub in where we are, along with the bathroom, the water closet. We need to expand that out, and I need the room for a tub for my wife, and that's why we're doing this. And we're paying particular attention not to disturb the neighbors from anything from a view perspective, or in any way to harm the vegetation. And anybody that comes and visits our house, I think you would be impressed with the backyard and front yard, and how we take care of things. We have 9 olive trees in the front yard that we also have. The arborist takes care of those for us on an annual basis. And this is something that it's important for us, just from a lifestyle, and I'm really talking about my wife. That's all I have to say. Oh, and the arborist that we use is called Dillon Garden and Tree Service, which is a part of Professional Trees of California. And the arborist, the gentleman's name is Doug Daly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Farson, I see your hand up. Is that a question for the applicant's team? Okay, go ahead.
It is. So, Mr. Delaplane or Mr. Ward, so I'm looking at the staff report. It says the 270 square feet addition is going to be for an office and a gym, but you just said it was to expand on the bathroom. Won't go into the reasons for it that you just mentioned. Which is it? Is it an office or a gym, or is it expanding a bathroom?
It's expanding the bathroom, and because of the design, so it's just not a little nook, we also need storage. So if you're looking at the property, one end of it is we can turn that into it can be used for a closet, a master bedroom closet, which we're short of, number one. Number two is I could use that as a place to work out for a while. Right now, I go to an athletic club. I'm not real happy about going there for a host of reasons. And during the pandemic, I've been working out in the living room. I like to work out. This would create a space for me to do that. We don't have an office. I could also turn this into, put a desk in there and do my work. So our primary objective is to expand the water closet, which is the toilet area, and a tub area for my wife. And I could cut this thing short, but then it chops up, the design when you look at it from the outside in the house. And you always need storage. And when I'm doing something, I like to have a plan A, plan B, plan C, and say in case something doesn't work.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Commissioner Mason?
Yes. Thank you very much for your presentation, your explaining everything. My concern is since it's essentially an already enclosed area, I don't have particular concerns about that. My concerns are more about the trees, specifically the redwoods. The neighbors have mentioned that. That's why I was paying attention when Commissioner Farzan had talked about redwood tree, as you know, has a very wide and shallow root system. Would you be the concern is basically in adding the bathroom where you would trench for your sanitary sewer line to get out, because most of the redwood roots are within 3 feet of the surface. There are ways around it. I've had arborists, recommend, hey, you hand dig the trenches, you work around any root over, 4 inches or something like that, you has to stay intact. Would you be willing, since you already have an arborist on board, be willing to come back with an arborist report, specifically addressing those issues so that we can have a greater concern, we can alleviate concerns about redwood. My big fear is basically life safety. You kill off a redwood, if the redwood tree falls, that's a big tree to fall. And I want to make sure that we've all done our due diligence. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate your thought. Let me see if I can explain this. And Tim, you chime in.
Okay.
When you come out the back door off of my master bedroom, there is about a 2 to 2.5 foot step down. So what we're talking about is coming out from the bathroom, the floor equal to the floor. I don't want any step down because that's, I'm getting old, don't need that. And so when you think about the plumbing, it doesn't have to go underground. When you, am I making sense there? You got about a 2.5 foot space.
I think you're right, Tom. I mean, we're planning to tie into the existing sewer system under the house, in the going toward the main, back to the main house. We don't plan to go outside the building envelope at all.
And we don't have to go down.
No.
Because of the level of the house and where it is. It's a matter of just cutting through that foundation, but not digging down. I hope I'm making that clear. So there's no trenching required. But I'd be absolutely, if I need to have an arborist there during this whole thing, I'm willing to do that. There is no way that I want to do any harm to the redwood trees for a whole host of reasons. They, in my opinion, are one of the things that really make our property, and the shade that they provide. The owls that live in our trees, there's no way I'm gonna upset those trees, period.
Thank you, Mr. Delpine. Commissioner Mason, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much for the explanation.
Okay. Are there any other questions by commissioners to the applicant's team? Okay, so with that, we can open this item for public comment. So I'll look to staff to see if there's any hands raised.
If you would like to make a comment on this application, please go ahead and raise your hand now. Seeing none.
Okay, thank you. So we'll close public comment. So now, Mr. Ward and Mr. Delaplane, traditionally, you'd have 5 minutes to rebut any comments received during the public comment period. So I'll just ask, is there anything additional you would like to add?
If you would like to add anything, you would need to unmute yourself. Mr. Delaplane has unmuted himself.
No, I just want to say, look, I appreciate the time and I appreciate the focus. I don't have anything more to add. I think we've got a good plan. I think it not only benefits us, but I think we're doing everything we can to, support our neighbors. Both the neighbors that wrote in did not have a problem and are okay with this variance. Their concerns were the redwood trees.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I don't have anything more to add.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Ward. Thank you, Mr. Delaplane. So with that, we will close the public portion and bring it back to the commission for discussion. I would like to ask staff a question. Sorry to put you on the spot, but the wall structure that is there right now, would that have ever required a variance? And
No, it would not, because structures, fences, walls, up to 6 feet in height are permitted under the zoning code. So it's not uncommon to have a fence or wall even at the property line, provided that it's no higher than 6 feet. So it's the additional height which would trigger the need for a variance, and certainly a living space encroaching into the setback as is proposed here would require that. So no, the wall would not have required a variance.
okay, thanks for that clarification. I will open up to my fellow planning commissioners. Anyone, Commissioner Sturm?
From my perspective, the addition seems very low impact, and I think it would fit into the area that already has some visible building mass to it. And I think it's, ideal that it's already screened from the adjacent neighbor by these mature trees. In terms of the findings that we would need to make in order to approve a variance, I personally can make the findings. For the first finding, to me, the storm drain easement in the rear yard would constitute a special circumstance and a limitation on the property. And I think there are very small pockets within the buildable area that are not built out, but there's not a lot of options for that. And I mean, if they're expanding a bathroom, you can't just stick a bathroom on the front of the house where there's main windows to some other kind of living space. So I don't share staff's view that there are other just as suitable areas to do the expansion for these programmatic elements that the applicant is wishing to do. For the second finding, my thoughts are that other properties without the constraint in the rear yard would have more buildable area. So anybody that doesn't have this easement going through their backyard is obviously going to have an opportunity for buildable area in the back. And I don't know where the easement continues, but I'm looking at the variances that have already been granted for those few triangular lots. That would lead me to believe that any other properties with this, with the constraint due to the irregularity of their lot size or a similar rear yard easement would also have a high likelihood of being granted a variance. So this doesn't seem like a privilege that would not be allowed, or that wouldn't be allowed nearby neighbors. And then lastly, for the third finding, driving around the neighborhood and then also reviewing the satellite images, it seems to me that the neighborhood is composed of relatively large sprawling houses. My neighborhood has lots of similar size and the houses are 15 to 2,500 square feet. So in this neighborhood, clearly they're more in the range of 4,000 to 5,000 about. So when you're driving around, I think you get a consistent sense of small side yards and sort of sprawling, fairly large, massive houses. And to me, and also there's already variances in place for some of the neighbors. So to me, granting this variance would not be in conflict with the intention of the zoning regulations for the neighborhood. And that's all of my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. I was looking at my other screen at the staff report when the other three hands went up, so I don't know the order. So I'm just going to go in order on my screen. We'll go Commissioner Maggio, Mason, and Farzan. Commissioner Maggio.
Thank you, Chair. Question for Nancy. Nancy, could you show us from one of the drawings in the staff report where that drainage easement goes through on the property?
Just pull it up. It's through the property, but according to the AP book, it's measured from the rear property line forward. So this whole portion is 40 feet. So there's a little buffer on either side.
Okay, thank you.
Was that your only question? Okay, Greg, I see you have your planning director.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm with Nancy, for the benefit of the commissioners and the public attending, that this red roofed house is the subject property, and the plans that were submitted did not have north up, they had north down. So the street is down on that plan sheet that you were just seeing that Nancy showed. And so the 40-foot easement is at the rear of the house, against the rear property line, currently where the backyard is. It underlies the backyard, correct? Nancy, is that correct?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
That the 40-foot easement is at the rear of the house, between the rear of the house and the rear property line, which is currently developed with the backyard.
That's correct.
Okay, so similar kind of build out with the adjacent properties, and pretty typical to have the backyard in between the house and the rear property line. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Mason.
Thank you. This is my opportunity to be Commissioner Farzan and get hyper technical, so sorry about that. Just because the fence is allowed to be built within the setback is not the same thing as saying that the wall was permitted when it was constructed. If this is going to be enclosed, the wall would need to be permitted, and that does not necessarily mean that it would be able to be used as is, and may in fact need to be removed and replaced depending upon documentation. Do you know if that wall has been built with a permit, or was it unpermitted?
I don't have any information on that. I did not see any other permits on file with the planning department.
Yeah.
For this property.
Essentially, the concern is everything that they're saying about, hey, we're not going to need to do footings, drill piers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, goes out the door if that wall needs to be removed and replaced with a permanent wall.
Yeah, we have no evidence that it was done with permits. That's not to say it wasn't. However, it's our assumption that the existing wall would need to be removed and replaced with a structural wall that would be able to carry the loads. We have every indication that the building department is going to need to see a new wall there to be able to carry shear and structural loads associated with the addition. And so our assumption is, again, a conservative assumption is that the wall would need to be removed and replaced, and thus there would be some over excavation outside the building. The existing wall put in perimeter drainage is typical. Even if you don't do that, you would still need to over excavate to be able to get the forms in and build a proper footing, et cetera. So that's our assumption.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Person.
I guess the reason I asked Mr. Delaplane the question was, it's for me, again, I'll look at the findings I need to make, but it's one thing if it's a necessity I need to build out for X versus it's an office and a gym on an almost 5,000 square foot home. So again, I'm just looking further on other variances that may come up for us. And that's kind of my thought process. I'm not against it. I think for me, the harder issue, and I know we've had a couple of the triangular properties that have come actually in that very neighborhood. One was actually a pool house addition that was in a very triangle shape, and we decided to allow it with some changes, etc. Here, I'm still trying to figure out the necessity for me to push hard to make those findings for this. That's just kind of where I am. I'm not saying I can't make them, but I still think we're making an exception here to allow this to go forward beyond a variance, because I think this opens up the door to other variances, but I can be swayed. That's kind of where I am right now.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr.
And Commissioner Farzan raises the I believe kind of an issue of ADA accessibility, and we are cognizant of the ADA and have provisions in our code for reasonable accommodations that would allow for exceptions or deviations from our code to be handled at a staff level to provide a reasonable accommodation under the ADA. So those provisions do exist, and it's not what our understanding of this project is.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Commissioner Farzan, did you have another comment?
No, that was it for now. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Sturm, I saw your hand go up.
I just wanted to ask a question. So the findings are very straightforward, and we're tasked with whether the question of whether we can make the findings for whatever the decision is that's before us. Where is it written where we're supposed to judge the frivolity or the necessity of somebody's project? I mean, to me, that if it's a very basic part of a program for a house, then you could compare like those basic needs that need to be encompassed in a structure versus another lot and their ability to provide space for those needs within the zoning regulations. I can see how that could sort of play into as a finding one, but I don't feel comfortable making a judgment on whether they really need the variance. Am I incorrect? And I mean, yeah, is that incorrect? Is that part of our decision making? I'm not trying to like, I don't know, poo-poo anything that anybody said. This is an important question for me. So I'm asking staff, is there something like?
I'm not answering that question. I was going to make another comment, but I'll wait.
Is that part of the variance findings?
The word frivolity does not factor, it's not in any of the variance finding. The variance findings speak to reasonable development. So I think that is the kind of umbrella term under which the city can construe, if it's a 200 square foot bathroom versus an 800 square foot bathroom. I mean, I think there is the realm of the city's discretion on whether to grant a variance, a deviation from the development standards based on the extent to which that is being requested and the reason for which it is being requested. If it's a 5-bedroom house and they want to add a 6th bedroom, that is something that the city can consider. But I think 5 bedrooms would be seen probably by a court of law as reasonable development. And so, wanting a 6th one is not a necessity for the city to grant that variance. So that I think that, it's not so much judging the need for something, but the reasonableness of the request in the context of the site. So the findings relate primarily to what's unique about this property, that the size of it, and it is more than the minimum size in the district. The shape of it, it's rectangular, so it's not a challenge from a geometry standpoint. The topography of it, it's largely flat, or other constraints that make it reasonable development of it infeasible, and essentially that they don't have the reasonable use of their property that every other property similarly situated does. And so we've spoken to the factors that have played into variances before, that triangular pie-shaped lots are often faced with having to kind of sawtooth into the setback a little bit. Those which are, rectangular, but the developable flat area is relatively small, and then it drops off precipitously, Sweet Drive being an example, where some encroachment into the side yards is historic practice. Size, if it's significantly undersized, that has factored in the past. And so, based on those, we're not seeing it. I think that, we don't have the benefit of an existing floor plan to see the relationship of the internals. And so based on where it's shown on the plans, I think our thinking was that this is just around the corner, but, meeting the setbacks. And so that was part of the thinking.
Did that help? Okay. Commissioner Person, you wanted to chime in there?
Yeah, so I just want to say, I don't think anything is frivolous in terms of what they're asking for. I just want very clear so that isn't lost here. Whether it's an office, whether it's the gym, anybody can, whatever they want in their homes. The reason I asked that question is because when I get the staff report, it says office and a gym, but then we hear a bathroom. So there is either there's a miscommunication or someone has said X and now they hear the recommendation is against it. Now we have Y. That's the problem that I'm having here, right? So if the plan was we're building an office and a gym, perfectly cool. That's fantastic. And I'm glad Mr. Delaplane works out every day. It sounds like, which is great. But again, I have that. I think for me, it would be number 2 is the hardest thing for me to say I can make that finding. It's not the end of it. I can be convinced of it, but that's where I am, Commissioner Sturm.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Maggio?
Thank you, Chair. Well, Greg covered quite a bit of what I was going to say, but just to elaborate a bit, I don't feel that easement in the back has any way prevented them from fully developing the property, because I think that's an area as a percentage to that very large flat lot would have been the backyard anyway. And they've pulled the house back fairly far on the lot. So they have a nice yard in the front and a generous presentation in the front and a 3-car garage. So I really don't feel that easement represents a hardship that would justify the variance. And I also feel that, yes, it's a neighborhood of large homes, and they're all similarly large. But I don't think they have a hardship that constitutes a variance from the current zoning. And I think within a 5,000 square foot house, without looking at the floor plan, it might be very possible to do some interior remodeling, which is sometimes less expensive to accomplish their goals. So I'm having a hard time making the findings.
Thank you, Commissioner Maggio. I'll just echo exactly what you said. I think it was really well worded. I agree. It's like Commissioner Farzan said, people are welcome to put whatever they want in their house. I do agree. I don't know if it was the presentation, that was confusing, or some of the word choices by the applicant that was confusing, but I too was under the impression it was office and gym. Doesn't really matter. I do see in the staff report, it says office, gym, and bath. But I agree with Commissioner Maggio that, especially when you look at the Google Earth view, that's what I'm looking at my other screen right now, the easement has not precluded development, and there is a large portion in the front portion of the house that could accommodate a 270 square foot addition. I would have liked to seen an interior site plan, but that I think is beside the point. I cannot make the findings personally to grant a variance personally. Commissioner Maggio, you have your hand up? No. Okay. Vice Chair Labange?
Yeah, I can't make the finding for number 2. I would say I was a little troubled to hear from the applicant, and I don't want to put staff on the spot here, but what the kind of unknowing where this was going, and having not been through it with the city, like with the putting in an application and kind of the feedback that normally comes. I would hope something like this, the feedback would come quickly, or, after it's had its due time to be reviewed, that, hey, this is a variance, and, kind of exactly what we're talking about. So I would just ask that maybe we try to whatever that takes internally, because, in my day job, I've been to many planning commissions where, critical is waiting for, where is the staff report on your project? And it has, mine is very different than this, and adversarial. So I expected to get the negative staff report a lot of times. But that's critical. So I just hope we get that, because outside of that little thing, I'm pretty much always in line with where staff is, because you guys are the professionals who do this day in and day out, and we're just here as volunteers trying to kind of make sure, it's in the guardrails. So that's all. I hope we whatever was amiss there, I hope we could solve that in the future. But I can't support this based on primarily number 2. That's all my comments.
Okay, thank you. So I am hearing kind of a mix. So I would welcome if anyone is wanting to make a motion. I can also maybe do an informal little poll to see where people stand. I've heard I am not able to make all 3 findings. Commissioner Labange, sounds like you're not able to make all 3 findings. Sounds like Commissioner Farzan is not able to make all 3. Commissioner Maggio, Sturm, and Mason. Or maybe with that, hearing that 3 are not able to make it, I will welcome a motion, one way or the other.
I actually think it's 4. I think Commissioner Maggio also said she could make the findings. I could be wrong.
Oh, yeah, sorry, my apologies.
So that's
Should be-
4.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
correct. Thank you. Okay, well, what the,
I mean, I think, I mean, again, I'm happy to make the motion. I think the motion, at least based on the way I'm sitting and 4 of us are sitting, I would move that staff prepares a denial resolution for our next meeting. I think it's pretty straightforward.
Second,
thank you, and Mr. Wolf, I'll let you chime in first.
Would the motion include closing the public hearing and then bringing that resolution back on consent?
I would include that
Okay.
as a friendly amendment.
yeah, I'd second that again.
Okay, so I hear a motion with the friendly amendment to for that staff prepare denial resolution to come back on March 21st, closing the public portion and bring it to the consent calendar. There's a motion by Commissioner Farson and a second by Vice Chair Labange. So we'll please move to a roll call vote. Commissioner Farson,
Aye.
Commissioner Maggio,
Aye.
Commissioner Mason,
Aye.
Commissioner Sturm,
Aye.
Vice Chair Labange,
Aye.
and Chair Radnich. Aye. So for the 6 planning commissioners who are tonight, that's 6-0 voting in favor of staff preparing the denial resolution. And next on our agenda, 7G originally was on our agenda for HDP 32-21, Todd Delamar. And this one is being proposed to be continued. So do we take a vote, correct? Mr. Wolf?
Correct. So as of this morning, the applicant has requested a continuance to the next meeting. So we are recommending that we'll happily oblige with the applicant's request. And so requesting that it be continued to the next meeting 2 weeks from tonight, the 21st.
Okay, so do we have a motion for that? Can we get someone to make a motion? Okay, Commissioner Maggio, thank you.
I make a motion that we continue HDP 32-21 to March 21st.
Second.
Thank you. So motion by Commissioner Maggio and second by Commissioner Farson, and a roll call vote. Commissioner Farson,
Aye.
Commissioner Maggio,
Aye.
Commissioner Mason,
Aye.
Commissioner Sturm,
Aye.
Vice Chair Labange,
Aye.
and Commissioner Radnich. Aye. Thank you. Moving to item 8, other business, ARC volunteer for March 11th. That's this Friday. Ooh, Commissioner Mason volunteered. Okay, you're inked in. It's still Zoom digital review.
Yes, via Zoom 9:30.
Thank you. Commissioners reports. Do we have any commissioners reports? Okay, I'll share GPAC, said it like 10 times tonight. GPAC meeting tomorrow night. The last couple have been pretty good, intense, digging down. We're meeting weekly right now to dig through line by line through the opportunity sites and some new potential opportunity sites. So if you are able to, I just offer to the planning commission and members of the public, the GPAC meetings do really help inform what we're doing in planning commission right now. So I'll just throw that out there tomorrow, 6 o'clock. And the one last week was to just kind of dive into a handful of it's called new opportunity sites that have been identified by members of the public or some of the committee members. And so we've been diving through those, looking at them in detail to still kind of figure out which sites as a whole we want to have on our inventory to flip through to look at the different densities, play around with the numbers for the densities to try to come up with the RENA requirement. So that means tomorrow at 6. Planning director's report.
Can I ask a quick question about that? Sorry, very quickly. I know Greg addressed some of this earlier in today's this evening's meeting, but with respect to the new opportunity sites, when is the, I guess I'll say, official time where somebody would consider them to include them? I understand it's going on with GPAC. Like, what's the next step? There are 5 new sites. People think this is a really great idea. GPAC then presents that out. Is that come to Planning Commission as the next stop? I'm just trying to figure out how that process works on new sites.
Yes, so, I think the law would allow the council to include a brand new site up until the evening that it adopts the housing element.
Okay.
I think sort of operationally, procedurally, we have done extensive outreach and invited suggestions from the community. Many were suggested. I'm trying to recall the time frame. It was a while back, but we held a series of, I think, 5 or 6 housing 101s, and then moved into opportunity sites, and so we've solicited that, and there's a list. You will see this list of all of the potential sites that were suggested, either initially identified by staff, submitted by a committee member or member of the public, and kind of the assessment of each of those sites. And the GPAC has been meeting weekly. They put in 2, 3, 4 additional meetings in order to go essentially site by site and determine, assess it for their own, and to determine whether it should or should not be included through essentially a vote. So I would be surprised if a new site was proposed that hasn't already been proposed and is assessed, but that is a theoretical possibility, and not forestalled by anything. So we're not locked in at any point, but a new site would just need to be assessed appropriately.
Thank you, appreciate that.
And then in terms of a director's report, I don't think I have anything to report other than this past Saturday, the city council met for, I think, 5.5 hours with the city manager, admin director, city attorney, and a facilitator to discuss goals for the year, and reaffirmed the goals of wildfire and utility safety, and Vision Zero and multimodal transportation. And there was some discussion given to a renewed focus kind of on the downtown as it relates to the work of the housing element. So we by law are required to plan for a minimum of 2,114 units plus a buffer. minimum 13 to 15 to 30%. And so that you'll be seeing that shortly, what the GPAC recommends out. And there was discussion at the council level about those new units and those new residents will ultimately need to, they'll have demands for services and need to be able to move around and recreate and have adequate utilities. And so discussion around how best to plan for that ultimate growth. And so we're going to discuss it some more with the council, and whether that would happen through the general plan process or updating the downtown specific plan or another mechanism altogether. But that is on their mind, on the council members' mind, is forward thinking, and I'm going to say aspirational thinking about how, as we accommodate new growth, new residents, and welcome them to the community, how we can be more sustainable and more walkable, and provide for existing residents and new residents in not old-fashioned ways, in new innovative ways. So, that's what I have. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, with that, 10:03. Thank you, everybody. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good week.